Hello, and welcome back to Super Wall Jump, a video games podcast where I talk to content creators, to video game developers, and everything in between. With me today, I have...
Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Vornoff. I'm an actor, filmmaker, and host of the podcast Cinephire.
Thanks so much for coming on, Eric. Today, we are going to be talking about AI. And not just like the AI in video games, but what AI is, conceptually, mechanically, and what role it has in creative fields. So it's going to be a fun one, full of very saucy opinions.
Oh, definitely.
What is generative AI?
Generative AI. So as far as what I understand, pretty much, say, if you want a picture generated, say for argument's sakes, say if you tell AI generate a picture of my dog on my bed, and then it will generate that. Or say if you wanted to do it in a video format, you could do that as well. So
Yes, basically, it sort of works with like Google, wherein you put in your request and then whichever AI you're working with, whether it could be Chat GPT, which is the most famous one, it could
yep.
be Sora, which is used for, video creation. It could be Claude, which I've heard people use a lot for programming. There are tons of things that AI is used for, and a ton of different platforms people use it for and use it on. What AI actually is, especially the most common forms of nowadays, are LLMs. Do you know what LLMs are?
No.
Okay, well, fun story time. LLM stands for Large Language Model. So basically, the way that AI used to work was with neural nets, where they would have an AI and they would train it over time with giving rewards and that sort of thing. And you could train it with a pretty small data set. LLMs basically are a form of AI which is predictive. So if you give it a sentence, it'll be able to mostly guess what the end of that sentence will be. And in order to
Okay.
do that, in order to be good at being predictive, what you need for that is an enormous amount of data. Just a huge amount of data. And that is a major point of contention for a lot of people. Because where do you think people are getting all of this data for LLMs to consume? The LLMs, for the large part, are trained off of other people's work. If you need it to be trained on thousands and thousands of books in order to be good at writing, it's going to be taking from those people's books and basically chewing them up and spitting them out as its own process, as its own work. Same with if you're doing video content, or if you're doing coding, or if you're making images. The way LLMs work is they basically had to feed these AI models a ton of stuff that other people, human people, have made. And in most cases, those people did not consent to having their work being chewed up and spit out,
Mm-hmm.
which is less than ideal. So,
Oh yeah.
you're a filmmaker. What have you been seeing people use AI for?
I've been seeing a lot of people use AI like for posters, and I've been also even seeing people even in the film industry even use it for casting announcements, um say with my case with me recently getting cast to play a killer clown in a horror movie. All that the filmmaker really did was just take a picture of me, and then asked AI to generate me having clown makeup and the rainbow hair. So yeah, I've seen a lot of people do that. And there even was some other movie I watched not too long ago, and then I then asked the filmmaker who made that movie. I was like, "Hey, I really like that song. Could you tell me the name of that song?" And then they told me that that was generated by AI, and so not only for artwork and also and for casting announcements, even for music as well. And even from what I've heard, now this is in my opinion, a more reasonable usage of AI. Like, say if an actor is using like a teleprompter just to read their lines, and then you can easily tell that they're reading off of it. There have been some filmmakers that I've known who actually have used AI, just to fix that. And now that I would say is reasonable, but I mean for posters, yeah, I think that's you know, that right there is just putting people out of work, which is exactly why that the whole actor strike and the writer strike happened a few years ago. It's because AI is putting a lot of people out of work.
Yes, because if you are, any sort of business person, you look at something like ChatGPT, which you can use for free, and say, "Oh, hey, generate me a script." Or you use Sora, which I don't know too much about Sora, but I guarantee you it's cheaper than hiring Brad Pitt. And you can say, "Oh, generate me a hello Sora, generate me a leading man walking defiantly into the sunset." You can do that, and you can do it at a fraction of the cost,
Hmm.
which is a problem, especially for people in creative fields. Because if we think about, the poster, who could be involved in the making of a poster? You have a photographer, graphic designer, you could have a typesetter who figures that kind of thing out. It is a lot of different roles that go into many different pieces of media, even just a poster, who can all be put out of work by AI. And that on its own would be a problem if it weren't also for the fact that usually AI stuff is very easy to tell that it's AI.
Mm.
I don't know about you, but for me, when I see people posting online, I'm like, okay, cool. I know that's AI because AI has a lot of the same style. It
Hmm.
has, that sort of airbrushed, highly embossed quality to it. Um, there's a lot of tells, and you can be like, "Oh, hey, cool. I can tell that you used AI here." And to me, that makes me look at the people who used it as, "Oh, hey, you could not afford to pay someone properly." Like, for example, if a restaurant uses AI images for their menu, I think, "Oh, wow, I should not eat here. Their food doesn't look good enough for someone to take a photo of it with their phone." So I
Hmm.
look at
When
AI, I look at, AI used in these cases, and I'm like, okay, cool. This is showing how cheap you are.
Right, and I mean, it's not going to cost you anything to just take a picture of it on your phone. I mean, you don't have to hire anybody. Just it, I mean, it shouldn't even take you not even 5 minutes to just take a simple picture off of your phone.
People want their product now. So we talk about what people use it for. You can use it for a wide variety of things. That's why they're trying to put it into basically every service. But
Hmm.
I think it's important to note that AI, as in generative AI, is not the same kind of AI that people oftentimes talk about when they're talking about video game AI. Video game AI is more or less just sort of algorithmic. It's not based off of using other people's work. It mostly controls stuff like enemy behavior, how the game behaves, and overall just how the game plays. If you think of a game like Metal Gear Solid 5, the game AI will, is, coded to respond to your actions over time. If you get a lot of headshots, enemies will start wearing helmets. If you are throwing a lot of stuff to distract people, they'll start looking for where you threw it from. And those are examples of, typical AI. It's mostly just behavioral modeling. So that
Hmm.
way, you know, people who are playing games can have a better time. And so that way, if you're playing a game like Metal Gear Solid 5, if you're firing a gun, enemies don't just walk to the left for an hour, which is why it's important. And the writers and actors, for example, went on strike due to AI because they wanted to make sure that, for example, if you are Brad Pitt, they're not just going to replace you overnight. Because again, all of these studios could just say, well, we don't need writers anymore and we don't need actors. Yeah, the tech is kind of iffy right now, but in a few years, Who cares? And essentially, the strikes of 2021 came about because actors and writers and crew were all like, hey, we want to make sure we are not replaced. And this is one of our last opportunities to be able to stand up and say, no, you cannot replace us.
Yep. And then there were a lot of people, in the industry of film, like who were warning that, eventually we're going to have AI generated actors. And I believe James Cameron even was one of them. And James Cameron was saying, yeah, this is what I tried to warn you guys about, like in Terminator and all that. And then last year, it went viral about how there was an AI generated actress. I think her name was Tilly Norwood, and how there was so much backlash about that. It's because actors were saying this is not fair to us, because she's not a real actress. Wow, and knowing all of us have to work our tails off, just to, get the work in the first place, and and to get in front of an agent and all that. And wow, when this AI generated actress, instantly gets signed, when I mean, all those actors have every right. I mean, as far as their anger goes, yeah, they have every right.
And it should be noted that this AI actress, of course, is a young woman, which, especially given the atmosphere right now, is very telling. That people were very excited about creating an AI actress that can't say no. But
Hmm.
what are some of the pitfalls you think of using generative AI in video games?
Well, in video games, honestly, I feel like a lot of the same issues in film also just happen to cross over with the video game industry, and a lot of the same issues, such as with the actors and writers strike, happen to have crossed over with the video game one. Putting people out of work and all that. And so I really don't want to be too redundant about that. So
Yeah. But by and large, hey, just like film, video games have writing. Video games oftentimes have actors doing
yep,
mocap or doing voice acting. If you've
yep.
listened to a previous episode of this podcast, I talked to a voice actor about the threats of AI to his job. And additionally, lots of video games have graphic assets, and those assets theoretically could also be made by AI, which, again, it's not the end of the world. But I want to point out that there are expectations of games. People are playing games because they want it to be lovingly made. It's also why people watch films. They want to see the work that people made. You're not going to watch Tilly Northwood. You want to go watch, the actor that you know. You want to go see real people doing real things
Hmm.
because that adds to the experience. Part of the whole Marvel fatigue that has been plaguing the box office recently is cool. You have these people who are just CG'd onto infinite, computer generated backgrounds, and they're basically just acting in a void, and it doesn't feel real, and the quality suffers. And if you notice the Stranger Things finale being less than great, and now there are allegations of them making it with AI, and the question is of, okay, cool, how much AI is good? And it appears that even if you just use it for writing, or even if you just use it for X or Y or Z, people are gonna be mad about it, and that's probably going to be bad in the overall product. Because one of the important things about making your own work is you understand how it was made. If
Yep.
you are making a cake, for instance, you remember, okay, cool, I added 3 eggs, I used this much flour, I used this much water. Whereas if you are just ordering cake batter online, which I don't think you can do, and I don't think you should be able to do, even if it does exist. But then if something goes wrong, you don't know where it went wrong. And that's sort of the case with a lot of AI stuff, is you can get a product which is flawed, but because you don't know how the flaw was made, you have to go back from scratch. And many times people just need to redo in the entirety of the work that the AI made for them.
Yep. And Yeah, and also, and a lot of people have pointed out that when you have AI generate a script, generate an actor, it's not doing it out of passion. It's more so doing it out of obligation, and and people definitely can notice when it's done with passion, versus when it's done out of obligation.
Yes, usually if you are going and saying, okay, cool, well, I need to make a video, I'll just have AI do it, you don't really want to do it. And I personally believe that with a lot of creative work, you can tell the intent inside of the product, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure, certainly.
If someone makes a piece of art, I can look at it and be like, okay, cool. I think I know what they were feeling when they made this. And that's part of why people engage with art is because they want to engage with other people. And
Yeah.
if people engage with that art and then are told, oh, well, actually, an AI made this, the backlash is pretty extreme.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And then when they face that backlash, it's like, well, that's just part of the consequences to it.
Yeah. Something that can happen recently was Expedition 33 had won like the Indie Games Game of the Year award. And then it came out that they had been using AI generated assets as placeholders. Using that, they lost that Game of the Year. Now, if you've watched the Game Awards, if you have had your ear to the ground for the past 6 months, you probably know they have plenty of awards as is. But I personally know people who are hesitant to touch what has been a widely like lauded game because they used AI at all. It wasn't even for a big part. It's just they used AI to generate some newspaper textures that are in like 5 minutes of the game. But because AI was used at all, now every part of the game is under scrutiny. You're like, oh, well, I don't know for sure that, all of this other stuff that you made isn't made with AI. It's sort of like saying, oh, hey, guys, yes, we know that this last batch of chicken wings was actually rat feet. We promise it won't happen again. You're going to be like, how did that mistake happen? Why were there rat feet instead of chicken wings?
Yeah,
What's going on?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because that's a pretty extreme thing to mess up on.
Yeah. And that's why I think, listener, if you're using generative AI, I think you should think about how and why you're using it. Because again, if it comes out that you use it at all, people will probably look upon the entirety of your work with a lot more suspicion and derision. And that's not even
Yep.
counting the next topic, which is the AI bubble. Now, I don't know how much you know, Eric, about the economics of how AI is working.
The only thing that I really know is that it is negatively impacting some people on the financial level. Going back to what I said, I'm sorry to be redundant, but how people are losing jobs over it, and so I do know that it has had some impact on the economy, but that's really as far as my knowledge goes.
So, the big thing to point out is AI is making negative money. I believe Sam Altman, the guy behind ChatGPT, has said if every single ChatGPT user was charged $200 a month, they still would not be breaking even. So essentially, it's a giant money pit. It is sort of in the vein of Uber or crypto, where people are throwing more money at it in the hopes that eventually it will take, because that was how Uber came into being. Uber was not profitable at all for about a decade, but they figured, okay, cool. If we undercut taxis and then replace them, then we can do whatever we want with the rates. It's why Uber has pushed so hard for self driving, because the most expensive part of Uber is the driver. And AI is similar in that there's a lot of use cases, but not a lot of use cases where people will be willing to pay for it. I know people who have used ChatGPT for all kinds of stuff, but if you look on Facebook or, on Instagram and you see people making those fun AI generated whatevers, do you think they'd still pay for it if they had to pay $5?
Probably
Probably
not.
not. That
No.
drinks. Yeah, they wouldn't do it. And at a certain point, it's like, okay, cool. Is this sustainable? And the answer seems to be no. And that's even before you consider data centers. Now, I know something that's been happening, at least in my neck of the woods, is data centers are starting to crop up all over the United States because they want to train their AIs more and more and more. People's main complaint has been, oh, well, these AIs aren't good enough. Oh man, they're still having these issues. And the best way to improve these LLMs is by giving them more data to work off of, which, coincides with building more data centers. Now, these data centers are very expensive, not just in terms of building them, but in the terms of electricity costs. My electric bill has gone up over the past few months simply because they're having to provide power to these data centers, which is
Yeah.
not great.
I mean, that sucks, but at the same time, I also cannot understand why. I mean, just to be clear, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that I do understand why.
The long and short of it is there is a much higher demand for electricity for a product which is not making anyone any money. And additionally, there have been rumors of increased water use. There's obviously the economic and environmental impact of building a giant data center that eats a lot of electricity um, on a power grid, which is, notorious for not being very good. And in this day and age where you have stuff like Texas losing power entirely due to terrifying winter storms, do we really need other giant power sucks on the grid? Probably not. What kind of experience have you had with AI aside from just, them making that poster with your face on it?
Yeah, honestly, I was caught off guard about that, because I was just expecting that they would just simply would just use my picture. They just say, "Oh, he was cast as a clown." But I mean, I get it. With me being cast as a clown, they wanted me in clown makeup. But at the same time, knowing that it was generated by AI, it's like, okay, then I highly doubt that that's going to be my makeup that I'm actually am going to use when I'm in the movie. So yeah, so it definitely does still leave a lot of ambiguity about it. And I mean, me personally, with all my films that I've made, I haven't used AI. I mean, I definitely have used CGI, and I can imagine that. I can imagine back when CGI first came out, people probably were having very similar discussions about CGI, as what people are having now with AI. And I mean, can it can CGI be a useful tool when you absolutely need it? Yes, certainly so. Like Jurassic Park is a great example. Like how all the close-ups were all just like where how all the close-ups like were just the animatronic dinosaurs, but then all the full body shots was all just CGI, because doing a full body dinosaur in animatronic form is a lot harder. And so yeah, so that's within reason. And I do think that sometimes within reason, just like with CGI, I think AI could be a useful tool, as far as the film industry goes. But yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to get on the platform and say all AI is bad no matter what, because there are good use cases for LLMs. If
Yeah.
you look at some stuff being done in the medical field, basically they feed a bunch of data into these models and they're better at identifying stuff like cancer and the like. Or, for example, seeing how protein chains should be folding. There are good use cases for it. I
Yeah.
just think that if we're going to be automating stuff, we should not be actively trying to automate away stuff like film and movies and video games. And again, I understand that it's easier, but it's also easier to just, what's easiest is just not making anything at all. Yeah. Do you enjoy the creative process?
Yes, yeah, because honestly, I would say that that's the main reason why people should even get into the film industry in the first place is if you enjoy it. Because if you don't enjoy it, then why are you even a part of it?
Exactly. And the process is kind of the point, right?
Yep, yep.
And for a lot of stuff, AI takes you out of that process and it tries to smooth everything over by taking you out of the process as much as possible. But again, whether it's acting or writing or shooting, the making of it is part of the fun.
Oh yeah, and there's just some. It's hard to put into words. It's just knowing that you created something, and then afterwards people actually are watching what it was that you did and then seeing and then seeing them react to what it was that you made and then them giving their feedback regardless if it's good or bad because feedback is feedback and then feedback even if it's bad it definitely can still help you grow as an artist because I could definitely safely say my first feature length film is not that very good, but I mean, if we're going to be honest, mostly every filmmaker will say the exact same thing. Most other filmmakers will say, "Yeah, my first film was garbage." I mean, from what I even heard, even Steven Spielberg even has said, "Yeah, I look back at my old films and I utterly cringe."
Yeah, because that's part of being a creative. That's part of being a person is you grow and you change and you learn and then you can look back and see how far you've come.
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, that's also part of the fun of it. I am able to go back and see some of the first acting I ever did, or even the first episode of this podcast, and I can look back and say, man, I could have done X, Y, and Z a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like as far as my first film goes, people complained about the pacing and people complained about how I dragged on for too long. So yeah, and so basically what I learned is like, okay, don't drag it out for too long. Just get to just get to the point already. Just have your scene, say what it needs to say, and then move on.
And would you say that using AI like prevents you from making those kind of mistakes? Because even if use AI, you can make those problems, but then you don't necessarily know them as your mistakes. And making your own mistakes and realizing what you did wrong is a part of becoming better.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said. AI is doing it more so out of obligation, and so and also from what I heard, some AI sources will just tell you what it is that you want to hear. Simply, it's because that simply because that's the way how it was programmed. But from my experience, Meta AI, which is what they have on Facebook Messenger, that one seems to be a little bit more biased, and that one seems to be more so kissing your feet. Chat GPT, from my experience at least, yeah, it can be that way, but Chat GPT though tends to be a little bit more honest, which I mean I do appreciate that.
Yeah. But you would say, as a consumer, that you probably wouldn't really want to engage with something knowing that people used AI to make it, right?
No, no, and I mean, people watch movies simply is because of we know that people made it, and yeah, and it's like that's part of the fun of watching a movie is that knowing that other people made it, knowing that people put in their blood, sweat, and tears into it, and yeah, and there was one time where where I read a script written by a human and then you compare it to a script written entirely by AI. And yeah, and the difference is night and day.
Yeah. It's easy, but there's a reason people still go to restaurants and don't just you know, order takeout or make microwave dinners because that human element is something that it's something that people want. And it's something people want not just in movies but also in games as well. It's why I think that Steam's tentative like, "Oh, hey, cool, this game was made with AI" tag, I think that's a good idea. I think it's important to know, especially considering how many games that are released that are pretty clearly made with AI in some form or another. I think being able to thus prioritize the games that are made solely by hand makes them more valuable.
Yep, and yeah, and matter of fact, I believe that I even heard a story once about how there was a movie made entirely with AI, which was screened for an audience. Now, I don't know where this screening happened, but I am sure that if you just Google it, you can find it. But yeah, and then people were complaining about it, saying that yeah, this has no heart to it, which is part of the reason why people have fallen in love with movies in the first place is because it has that humanity to it, like that the characters are relatable, you care about the characters, and and that's why movies like the Shawshank Redemption have went on to be like some of the most successful films of all time. And so when you have a robot do it, which I mean it can mimic it as much as it wants to, but it could be close to human, but it's not.
Hmm. And also, as we have already mentioned, the way that LLMs work is they take a bunch of pre-existing stuff and then they jumble it all up, chew it up, and they spit something out. It's not good at coming up with original ideas because it can only ever borrow ideas.
Yep, and it's funny you say that because I actually made a Facebook post, addressing about how it's very common for people to criticize the film industry for lacking original ideas. I mean, granted, I do see where they're coming from. It's because a lot of very successful films as of recent fall into those categories, like such as Avengers Endgame and the Transformers movies and so on and so forth. But what people don't realize is that you vote, is that, and this is how every business works, both in the film industry and outside the film industry, is that you vote with your wallet. And so, if you want to see more original ideas, well, then vote with your wallet. And so basically, if people want to see less AI generated films, like such as AI generated actors and writers, vote with your wallet.
You can vote with your wallet. You can, if you know something is made with AI, you can just not consume it and not spend your money on it.
Yep.
Hey, you don't need to spend money on, Chat GPT Pro. Hey, you don't need to go spend money on shows and games that actively say, hey, yeah, we're pro AI, we're AI first. And I don't think you're going to be missing too much because I will say, out of all the games that I heard about in the past year, the only game that has had any AI that I know of that has been talked about is X-Vision 33, and they only used it for placeholder art. I mean, it's anecdotal, but to me, that goes to show, hey, cool, if you are cutting corners with AI, that's not gonna help your game like reach people. And if you want your game to be popular, if you want people to really care about your game, you need to be willing to put the work in and do it yourself. It's really, I understand the temptation of asking AI to do stuff for you. I do. You know, I've worked an office job. I've done lots of things where it would be great if I could say, okay, cool. I don't want to like make this graphic. I'm just going to chat GPT it and have it generate it. I understand, the inclination to do that. And if you
Mhm.
do that, I don't think you're a bad person. I'm gonna be like really controversial here. I don't think using AI automatically makes you a bad person, but I think you should try
No.
doing it without AI first. And
Yeah,
then,
and
you can develop your own skills.
yeah, and I mean, it just so matters about the intent of why they're using it, and and also I also would say the impact also matters too.
So, with that, is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with? Where can they find more of you?
Okay, well, they can find me on Facebook, Eric Vornoff, and yeah, and they also can find me on Instagram, also Eric Vornoff, and yeah, and you can stay tuned to my podcast. My podcast is going through a rebrand. It used to be called Sit Down by the Fire, and my podcast originally started off as to talk about any topic, but then as time went on, it evolved more into the film industry, and I thought, Sit Down by the Fire is a great name for a podcast, but it just doesn't really scream film industry. So I thought, hey, I should change the name to Cinefire, which is a play on words. I'm from Terrifier, and so yeah, you also can follow Cinefire on Instagram and on Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel also called Cinefire, and yeah, and I also am planning on putting the podcast up on Spotify as well. But yeah, I definitely do want to thank you for having me on your show.
Fantastic. And as always, listener, thank you so much for listening. If you haven't told your friends about us, please tell your friends about Super Wall Jump. I don't spend a dime to advertise this podcast because I'm broke. So really, word of mouth is the way that we get new listeners. And if you would like to join on the conversation, the link to the Discord will be in the show notes or in the link tree. So come on in, tell us what you think of the episode or what you think about video games. Should we have more video games about dogs? I think so. But with that, thank you so much for listening and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you all have a fantastic day and stay tuned.